If you're stuck thinking that there's only one right way to succeed, you're missing the whole point. Actor turned director Lukas Hassel joins me to share how he stopped obsessing over acting as the only path and started creating from vision instead. What happened next? Recurring TV roles, feature films, and a whole new level of creative freedom. This episode will free you from the trap of perfection and unlock real momentum. Welcome to Be Unmessable with the podcast. And my name is Josselyne Herman-Saccio. I'm your host. And today, my very special guest and dear friend and client, Lukas Hassel, is our guest. And Lukas is an actor, a writer, a director. He is a script doctor. He was probably where you would recognize him from is playing Elias Van Dyke in seasons 8 and 9 of The Blacklist, a very bad and evil man on that show, but not in real life. And as a writer, he's won the Screencraft and Sinistry fellowships, and he has directed many of his own works. And he's just one of my favorite human beings in the whole world. We've known each other forever. So I'm so happy that he is here on the show. Let's welcome Lukas Hassel. Lukas, welcome.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I'm excited to be on your podcast.
I know it's kind of like a different context of our relationship, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So tell people, because in the intro, I just talk a little bit about some of the roles you've had and, what you do as a creative artist, but tell people how you ended up doing this because, you're not from the US, yet a lot of the work that you do is in the US now, obviously. What was, kind of your journey? I know that's a loaded question, but what was the journey that got you here?
Right. Well, it's a long journey because it was from a little town in Denmark where I sort of grew up north of Copenhagen. I had this dream
Which I'm
of
still,
become
I'm planning on going there. I am like, it's on my
oh.
list.
And if you do go in the summertime, please, because it's
Okay.
really like
Okay.
from October through April, not so great.
Not so
But
good. Okay, fine. Summertime, Copenhagen,
summer
got it.
is amazing.
All right, deal.
And I had I was one of those, I had a school teacher who was very much about drama and trying to get us into sort of expressing ourselves in a different way. And my school had like a theater, one of these old theaters with the red velvet curtains and stuff. So they were eager to use that as well. And so I guess we were sort of roped into putting on productions from early on. And so um, when it got time to sort of be more serious about what I wanted to do with my life, that was a real option for me. And so I applied to Trinity College in Dublin in Ireland, and I got accepted, which was a pretty they don't offer many spots, so I didn't really dare turn it down. I was really just doing it as a dress rehearsal for London. But then when I got offered the spot, I was like, ugh, what if I never get into London? I better grab this one. So I moved to Dublin without knowing anyone, knowing nothing really about it other than Trinity College being a great college. And so I ended up being there and got into theater. And after living in Ireland for 7 years, I always had my eye on New York, actually, more than sort of the US. Like New York had this magic thing about it. I was an
I'm sorry, is
exchange
there
student.
something other than New York for the US? I was pretty sure this was the US, but
This is
okay.
exactly. It's sort of a suburb of Europe, right? So,
Exactly.
so it was like I had been an exchange student in Cold Spring Harbor High School when I was 17, and I played the lead in Godspell back then in the high school, and I had visited New York. We watched the off Broadway Little Shop of Horrors, and I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. So New York was on the agenda, and I moved there in '96, and I had to find a way of how to get into sort of the acting world in a way. So I got into some theater initially, and then I asked around about managers and representation, and that's where you enter the picture. I was fortunate enough to sort of catch your attention early,
It
and
was a
we
long time ago, like
long
I
time
was
ago.
trying to remember what year it was because I remember how I met you, which for those of you listening, this will be interesting. People send headshots all the time to agents and managers, and I would get piles of headshots all the time. And one day I was with my daughter, Sophie, who's now 28. So that's why I'm trying to figure out when this was, but she was opening the envelopes with me. And, Lucas's picture gorgeous as he is and was, was like this shining, like, it was like, who is this Adonis? And she goes, you should work with him. So it's really because of Sophie that
Sophie.
we ended up working together, who's now
Thank you,
married and
Sophie.
her husband's from Ireland. So there you go. It all
Oh
comes
wow,
full
full
circle.
circle. Well, that's amazing. And so then, then I was in your capable and kind and trusting hands, and so the two of us have sort of built what this is to now, and I've sort of abandoned theater pretty much. I sort of fell out of love with that really, and sort of focused on indie film and TV and whatever you can sort of get your hands into, and then I transitioned into writing and directing and sort of basically sort of this notion of being unmessable with is that I at one point I realized I'm sort of a little tired of handing my power away to everybody else, which as an actor that's part of what we do, right? We walk into a room, we do the best we can, and then we walk out crossing our fingers, and it's not really in my control. And so writing was sort of the first step of trying to gain some of that control back that I had been given away for so long. And then the real you know realization is that you have to direct what you write with your team to really have that full control, because even as a writer you give a control away to other people all the time. So it was just sort of, that's been sort of the journey, and that's where I am now. I act, I write and direct, and I try to be a creative souls. I help a lot of other people with script doctoring. I love seeing passion and enthusiasm from people trying to make something happen for themselves. And so if I can be a part of that, I'm always happy to step up.
Yeah, and I love how you describe the journey, and obviously you are a writer, so you made it as succinct as possible. It was the Cliff Note version of your journey, which
Right.
is great.
True.
Um, but not everybody, especially creative artists like actors, because as the audience might not know, I've been working with actors, for 30 years, and a lot of actors end up messable with because they live like it's out of their control. Now, what I like about what you said is it felt out of your control, but there were actions you could take to be the author, not no pun intended, of your career. And I think that that's something that's underdeveloped in many artists these days. It's kind of, even if you're a painter, it's like, well, but if the gallery doesn't take me, then what am I going to do? Or a musician or a songwriter, it's like, well, but if I can't get somebody to sing the songs, then what do I do? So the mindset of what can I do versus, what can I do? Which is a whole different
Right.
context of what can I do, right? Is what I love about working with you, because it's never a dead end with you, like even way back. I mean, I seriously cannot remember how many years it's got to be 20 years or
It has to be, I think, a little over 20 years actually. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
crazy.
That is
How old
crazy.
are we? Oh my
I know.
God. But
I
anyway, I
know.
don't want to think about that. Okay. But I remember when you gave me the first script you gave me, I think it was Girls on the Run, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
just was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Not everybody has the skill
Sure.
to be able to write, and that wasn't even a vehicle for you. So how did you develop that side of your skill set or your talent, coming from really being in front of the camera or on stage to being the pen?
Well, it's a good question, and it is. I mean, it is unfair to a certain extent. Sort of, I'm a big proponent for telling people, listen, if something is not happening, you got to make it happen. Try to figure out how you can make that happen, right? And so, in my case, I always enjoyed writing, and I felt I was a good writer, and that may not be the case for other people. But then they have other powers that they can develop, right? So we're all different people, which is wonderful. So in my case, I always had a sense that I could write, but I never really took it seriously because I was so driven about the acting. But then when I had this realization about trying to take some of that power back and sort of figuring out other avenues to explore my creative satisfaction, I came up with Girls on the Run, which was this first script ever. So it was always like this really sort of great premise, but it was a little flawed because I just didn't have the skill set. But like with anything, if you don't work at it, you're never going to improve it, right? If you just hope for the best and then see what happens, again, that's not really taking charge of your own destiny, so to speak. So I joined a writers group led by a gentleman called Mick Cassell, who teaches dramatic writing at NYU. He had like a private group of people that he met with once a week, and you sort of brought in scripts and you critiqued other people's work, and you would um, almost through osmosis, pick up sort of writing tips throughout that, led by this great gentleman. And and the realization was that, when I went into that class, I thought, oh, it's all about my script and getting feedback on how to make my script better. But I actually learned so much more from reading other people's work and seeing what worked and what didn't work. And so I was less and less eager to bring my own work in. I was eager to read other people's work. And so it was just a matter of reading a ton of scripts and being aware, like put on that hat of like, well, what works and what doesn't work and why doesn't it work and why does that
Mm.
work, right? Put the ego aside, like not be threatened about, oh my God, this person is a much better writer than I am, and what do I do with that? And I'm going to critique it just to make myself sound better, whatever. It was all coming in with like an open soul, an open heart, and knowing where I was. And I was a novice, right? I was trying to become better. And so I think he said, the teacher said probably at the beginning of the class, it'll take like 8 or 10 years to become a good writer. And I was like, wow, that sucks, because I want to be a good writer now. But
Yeah,
in
exactly.
hindsight, he was probably right, because it took me maybe that amount of time to sort of just get it naturally. Like you're picking up certain things through in the class that you're sort of, applying, and it's almost like a technical thing. I'm applying this technique that I've learned from yesterday's class, and it takes a while for that just to sink in and be part of the process as you're creating. And so already sort of the second script I wrote, which was after Girls Don't Run, which was called Le Mécano, takes place in Paris. That got me like a top 30 place at Nichols, which was like the top of the screenwriting competition. And that was a real eye opener that I was in the right direction. And it just felt great to sort of realize, oh, here's something that I can really develop. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed sitting in my corner in Starbucks with my headphones on, typing away for 6 hours. That was my meditation. I would lose the world, right? And if you can find something like that, whatever it is for one person, if you can find that, that is such a gift. And for a long time, it was acting, and then writing snuck its way in there. And it wasn't that I was looking to replace acting, but I was looking to enhance that
Yeah.
experience and see how that could fit together and see how that would overall boost my creative journey.
Yeah, and I like to, when I coach people, I say it's really focusing on your vision, not the vehicle. Acting is a vehicle
Right.
for creativity or creative
Yep.
expression. So is writing. So you're not limited to one vehicle. If you're going someplace in New York City, there's lots of ways to get there, and to be able to focus on that vision of creativity versus getting stuck, like you said, like I was so stuck on the acting. And I think that happens for people, not just in the creative arts, but in business. You start a business, or you have an idea, and you get so myopically focused on the vehicle, you lose sight of the purpose, the vision, why you're even doing this in the first place. What is that experience that you're really after, which you can get at Starbucks,
Right.
which you could get on the stage, but it's not limited to the stage. And I think that's something that if people could start to, expand, like you said, you were out to enhance, not replace, expand their space in terms of the vehicles that they engage with, they'd find a lot more fulfillment.
I 100% agree. And it's also, I agree what you said about this notion of, which actually I use very much as a filmmaker. What you just touched upon is that if you know sort of what your vision is, if you know what you're trying to go for, then you realize there are many different ways of getting there. I would say the weakest directors, or the most difficult directors I work with as an actor, are the ones that are so locked in that it's almost like they almost want to give you a line read because they want to hear it this particular way, right? And so when I started getting into directing, I realized that as long as I know exactly what I want out of a scene, I can let actors sort of find there are many different ways of getting there, and you have to be cooperate and sort of, it's a collaborative effort with the people,
Collaborative, yeah.
collaborative effort with the people that you have on board, so you can be flexible if you know exactly what you want.
Yeah, and what you're speaking to, which I love what you're talking about the most difficult directors, the ones that are so locked in to the way they want to hear it. They'll justify it because they don't really see that it's locking in. They see that that's my vision. And I want to distinguish between a vision and a picture, because you can have a vision which is spatial, experiential. That's the impact you want the scene to have. A picture is exactly what it looks like and sounds like, and that messes with people. People's pictures, not just in acting or filmmaking, but in relationships. Like they have a picture of what their partner should look like, and then if they don't fit that picture, next, off with their head. We'll go to the next one. Or a picture of what they're themselves
Right.
should look
Right.
like. You look in the
Right.
mirror. I mean, you spend so much time on your well-being. It's very annoying to me every time I see all your posts of sweating and running and the snow and the rain. You're like the post office. It's like rain and
Right.
sleet. I'm like, God damn, Lukas Hassel. You know, it's like Newman on Seinfeld, because I can't engage with any excuse I ever have, because you're out in like negative 12 degrees and 900 degrees. I'm like, really? Come on, Lukas, give us a break, you know? But I can't remember what I was saying this for. Now I lost track. But so well-being, there's like a world of well-being, but you have that kind of discipline. And it does take that kind of discipline to master anything. So if you, and this was not the point I was going to make. I lost it because I
No,
got
no, no.
all
Yeah.
distracted with my own reasons of not working out. But I can't remember what sent me to that.
No, but it's no, but you're saying exactly the right thing, and it's interesting because I found in screenwriting, writing, this notion we just talked about as long as you know what your vision is, then you also know there are many different ways of getting there, and it can be limiting when you work with somebody who's like, well, say it this way because I need to hear it this way, the picture
Yeah.
versus the vision. In writing, it's been really interesting because I bumped up against, I would say, half of the people in the business prefer writing a certain way, and then I meet people that think the way I do, and it's to this point, and I'll explain it to you. I feel like when I write a sentence about, say, somebody is upset with somebody else and they're sitting at a dinner table, I would prefer to write, he gets angry with the person across from him, as opposed to he throws down his spoon and tosses the glass and spits the wine in the person's face, right? Because the first option gives flexibility to the actor. My intent is you're angry with this person. Now, that's it. Like, how you want to show that, I want to leave it up to you, as opposed to me guiding you detailed of how I need that anger to look. Unless it's for editing purposes or a particular purpose, then I prefer the first type of writing. And I get people sometimes bumping up against that, saying, well, no, I need to see what you mean by that. You need to write exactly what that looks like. And I just think the other one is more elevated writing. So that is still to be decided. I still every now and then bump up against people who sort of push back at the more flexible way of writing things. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be specific. If your intention is specific, that's fine. But exactly how it comes out in the movie, I want to be open to that.
Well, it's interesting because I keep trying to bridge, so it's not just about the creative arts, to entrepreneurism, which is most of my clients and coaching. So if you listen to what you're saying, it's very similar to, when I work with entrepreneurs, one of the biggest traps they fall into is doing it all themselves and, overwhelm and burnout, because they don't trust their team to really take the reins. Because for them it's like they have to control it, and they have to, just like what you're saying as a writer, it's like if you have a picture, it's got to look like this. And what I coach people to do is really give their team the objective. Here's what I want to accomplish. Now come back to me with three possible ways to do that, and one you're recommending, so that the team is the author and has some autonomy and creativity allowed to them. But when people are just like, just tell me what to do, don't make me think, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's the same thing in business. It's not just as an actor. It's like, tell me what you want this to look like. No, no, no. That's what I hired you for. Like, just like, I
Right.
want you to give me some possible expressions of this. So I think it's very translatable to business, and
Right.
acting is obviously a business, but yeah, to entrepreneurship as well.
No, I totally agree, and of course it comes down to, as an artist. I'm not sure how you would sort of segue that into sort of a business acumen, but it's, for me, it's just incredibly important to know myself. That's something I've come to realize, that the more brave I was in looking inwards and also seeing my flaws and figuring out what my strengths were, and then sort of facing those flaws and try to work on those flaws has been super important to getting me to where I am today, where I feel very at ease with myself and at ease with the world in general. But it didn't just come by itself. I had to be aware of that. I had to
Yeah.
actually look inward. And I think a lot of people are afraid of looking inward and figuring out exactly, who they are. When I get scripts sent to me about feedback, whatever, I can tell straight away a few sentences in if they're open to feedback or what type of feedback they're hoping to get, right? Because they can be defensive in very small ways, and it's just not helpful to the process. You have to know what you want to improve in order to improve, but and that doesn't mean you have to take all feedback for what it's worth, but you have to be open to it and then figure out which feedback is helpful and which feedback is not helpful.
Yeah. And that requires being able to try things on, like I always, because, in my business of coaching, it's could be considered feedback, some of it's pointing people in a direction. But if they're not willing to try on what I'm saying, be coachable, then it's sort of like, well, why are you hiring me? It's like, it makes no
Right.
sense. It's like, if you just want me to tell you what you want to hear, you can just talk in the mirror to yourself.
Yep.
It's not a problem.
Right.
But what does mess with people often is the fear of being criticized. So I
Yep.
can see that, when people go, oh yeah, give me feedback, a lot of people, they want feedback if it makes their opinion seem more valid, so it
Right.
adds
Right.
validation to their view. So that's the feedback that they want. But
Right.
being able to try on a jacket doesn't mean you have to buy the jacket. But if you don't try it on, how are you going to look at it on the rack and be like, oh no, that's not for me, that color's no good, that cut is no,
Right.
you don't know. So
Right.
try it on, there's no
It,
risk.
exactly. But that's also experience, right? Because when I started out, I remember getting feedback from everybody. Say in this writers group that I mentioned earlier, you would get feedback from everybody, right? And you would be like, oh my God, you would go home and you'd look at all these notes and you wouldn't even know where to begin because one person had this note about this, and then something was like a little opposite to that opinion. So which one am I listening to, and so forth. And then after a while, you start figuring out which feedback is helpful, because there are sort of, for me, there are two sets of feedback, right? There's the feedback where you can give me a script where it's not a film I would watch in a million years. I would not watch this film. I don't love this genre. I don't like these characters particularly, but I can help give you notes how to make your script better, right? As opposed to getting a script I don't like, changing it into something I like. That's the wrong feedback,
Right.
because I'm not helping, I'm not serving what this writer is trying to go for. So I can say, I don't like this, I would never watch it, but I can help you make it better. That feedback is helpful, and it's
Yeah.
only experience that'll make you sort out through time which feedback is this that I'm getting. Is it their feedback wanting to change my work into something that they would like, or are they trying to help me with what I'm trying to achieve? And
Yeah.
that's hard to figure out in the beginning. That's hard to discern which is which, and so that just comes with time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's like a muscle. You've got
Yeah.
to, I say muscle because now I remember it was your picture of what you look like. That's what messed with
Oh.
me about your exercise. But yes, it's like a muscle. So,
Yeah.
one question I like to ask everybody on the show is, if there was a situation you recall in your life where you were really dealing with something difficult, like super challenging, and it could have messed with you to the point of taking you out of the game, but somehow you pulled upon something that had you emerge and transcend the situation, emerge what I call unmessable with, which I always like to say is not about being tough. It's about being able to stay true to your vision, no matter what life is throwing at you. So is there some situation that comes to mind that you could share with us?
Well, I remember, I mean, for me, it has always been about geography, right? Because we know now what's happening in the world today with immigration and coming from a different country. And I came, of course, from Denmark to the US, and that is difficult. Visa situation, legally, how do you get this visa? How do you move on? How do you stay, giving yourself an opportunity to compete in the artistic world of creative work? And so there are many times in that journey where just logistically, it was almost impossible to figure out how to solve that conundrum, and would have been easier to a certain extent to go back to Denmark and try to make it work there. but
And you
it
were
just,
working there. I
and I
mean,
was
you
working there.
you had a career there.
I had a career there, but it just wasn't. It wasn't my journey. It wasn't. I realized at that point that it wasn't just about my creative journey. It was a journey of myself as a human being, and being in New York was gonna challenge me as a human being, not just as an actor. Where I felt in Denmark, I wasn't going to be challenged as a human being as much, potentially as an actor, but that life was bigger than that. So I had to dig in my heels and figure out how to stay here legally and move the ball forward so that I could become a bigger version of myself. Just explore, just put yourself into a tricky situation. I mean, New York is a
I
tough
remember
city.
that whole process. I mean, I remember what we
Yeah.
had to deal with
Yeah,
to
and it
get
was
you
just
the
exactly to get through the various levels of visas and moving through the thing, and so it was just really um, tricky to keep my head on straight during that process, because it would have been a lot easier just to tuck my tail in and sort of go back. And that was just, I just felt it didn't serve me as to what I was trying to do with my life. And so I had to figure out a way. And thankfully, I met wonderful people such as yourself along the way that were understanding of the difficulty of that and the process of what that would take. And so, nothing is just from my effort. Everything has been, in hindsight, a collaboration of kind, helpful souls that were interested in moving the needle.
I
So,
mean, as you're sharing this, it's so funny. I'm recalling now. I hope this is my memory is not like fading at my age, but wasn't there time we booked a Broadway show and then you couldn't do it because of the visa thing? That was
that
crazy.
was actually the situation that I thought of when I got booked on a Broadway show, and we started
Dream come
rehearsals,
true.
dream come true. And then they realized that my then O visa, which is like outstanding ability visa, which was a very difficult visa to get, qualified for everything else, off Broadway, movies, everything else but Broadway, because Broadway had special equity rules. So I had to drop out of that show.
Oh my
Um,
God, I remember that now. That
and
was
it
so
was
long ago.
it was devastating. And that was the time I thought, well, now I have to apply for the green card, because what's the point if I get to that stage, book a show, and then can't do it, then what's the point? And it's all about, when you apply for the green card, is a difficult thing. Foreigners listening to this would recognize what I'm talking about, but it's all about sort of picking your timing when you're going to apply, and then hope for the best. And in this case, it worked out. But yeah, that was devastating.
I remember it now as we were in the conversation. I didn't think about it before because we've had many, many memories together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
bumped up against stuff, but also big successes. So,
Yeah, no,
like
no, exactly.
like your most recent recurring role. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of people know you from that show.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great. I was on as a New Yorker, you have all these shows that sort of, as an actor, you sort of have to be on these shows to consider yourself a real actor. So, the Blue Bloods and all that stuff. And then I got on the Blacklist back in season 4 for like a one episode role, and it was great to be there and meet all these wonderful people and work with Spader and so forth. And then cut to sort of 4 years later, I got another casting for the Blacklist, and I was like, I wonder if they know that I was on in season 4 already. I was like, maybe I'll just do the casting, and then if it becomes a thing, we'll talk about whatever. And then they offered me the role, and then at the bottom of the email, they said, by the way, we know he was on in season 4. So I was like, that's great, good to know. So there was nothing. I didn't have to be secretive about all that. But then I got on the show and became a sort of reoccurring character on that, and it was just fun to be part of such a massive family. Like, it was such a popular show, and it was such a well-oiled machine, and you work with the best of the best, essentially. So it's like a great playground for honing your skills and just learning from all those people around you. But it was also eye-opening in sort of realizing the limitation of network TV as well, for me as a creative soul, because it's not collaborative particularly, right? Unless you're the star of the show, uh, there just isn't time to really listen to my suggestion about, well, what if I do this or what if I do that? You sort of just do, and it's a great exercise in doing and not messing anything up, and be professional and know your lines, hit your marks, and nail that character that you were cast as. But um, I had a realization that sort of collaboration is very important to me. And
I
so
can hear it. It's like collaboration and creativity seem like your vision. Like that's
that
the
is
space of your
that is the
vision.
space, and that's why I'm attracted to indie cinema, really, because in indie cinema, if there's little money involved and there's a lot of work involved, my demand is that I have a say, right?
Yes.
And so that's the cost benefit of this situation. So if I'm going to do that, I also want to be able to discuss my character with a director. I want to be able to make some suggestions to the character on the script and so forth. And that's the benefit of working in sort of more indie cinema, or indie features, which is where sort of I feel that my real heart is. Obviously TV is wonderful because you get to work with this top-notch people and it's super professional, but
And you get to be the bad guy,
and I get
although
to be the bad guy.
sometimes you're the bad guy in the other stuff, but
Yeah, no,
definitely I
exactly.
don't think of you as a bad guy. So it was interesting to see you play that role in that recurring way as
Yeah,
the worst guy in that show.
yeah, yeah. As really the worst guy, and it's been eye-opening how much power TV has. I mean, I've been recognized around the world for that role. I was in Australia, I was on a safari in South Africa. I got recognized both of those places, and I was like, wow, TV
Seriously,
has a
they're watching the
reach.
Blacklist here, but I guess they
Yes,
are.
they are. TV has a reach. Yeah, that's huge. That's really
It is.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
true. And
So
so what's coming up next for you? What's the next thing we can expect to see or look for?
so right now, as it happening, I wrote a psychological horror film called House of Abraham, which I play Abraham. I act opposite Natasha Henstridge and Lynn Shay, two incredible actors. We worked and shot it down in Austin, Texas, and that's coming out this summer.
Like, yeah, like
Yeah, like right.
momentarily,
Yeah,
actually.
momentarily, exactly, momentarily, actually. So it's going to have a limited release in New York and LA and in Austin, Texas, where we filmed it. And so that is incredibly exciting. It's a very dark, scary film on many levels. Mostly
Yes, it's
psychological. It's
creepy.
not
It's definitely creepy.
super
You are
creepy.
creepy in this movie, I have to say. It's the creepiest I've seen you.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It's pretty shocking, exactly. But it's not the gory horror. It's like the psychological
No,
horror, which is what
yes.
I lean into. And so that's really exciting. And then I've been working with a team up in Seattle. I've directed a couple of shorts up there, um, all of which have premiered at Holly Shorts at the big film festival out in LA. And they're interested in sort of upping their game and going into the feature world. So I have a script that I wrote based on a sci-fi short called Into the Dark, a short that I made like maybe 10, 12 years ago.
I
And I developed
remember
that
that.
in,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was
I
one of
remember.
your, yeah,
I love that one. I developed it into a feature and they're super excited about it. So we're currently raising money for that. And the plan is to shoot it in the spring of 26, where I would direct
beautiful.
that. So that's sort of happening there. And then I'm currently writing a new low budget horror feature because that's where it's at. So we'll see how that goes. I'm very excited about this horror script right now, which is what I'm going to head right after that. Right after this, I'm going to head up to Starbucks and
Oh, there you go
rewrite
with your
and
headphones. You got
revise.
to have a
Yeah,
backup pair of headphones every once in a while.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. So it's all about that, and then whatever comes down the line as an actor with you and Carson Coker Agency, we'll see what comes my way. I'm excited for all of
Yeah.
it.
And the opportunity to collaborate and express your creativity abounds, not just in the entertainment world, but in your marriage, in your family, in your exercise. But to be,
100%.
yes,
100%. It takes diligence and it takes bravery to look inside and sort of try to look at the things that maybe not work as well for you and try to change it, make it better.
yeah. Yep, high performance human being. That's who you are. And I love you so much. And I
I
just am
love
so
you.
happy. I just love you too. And I'm so happy that we've had this journey together and, the next chapter. And I always have to
Yes.
thank Sophie, my daughter, who has the best
Yes, me
eye.
too. Me too.
Yeah,
Sophie, shout out to Sophie.
that's
Exactly.
right. And I'll put a link to your socials and things so people can follow
Perfect.
you and keep abreast of all the different projects. And just thank you
Perfect.
so much for taking the time to be on the
Oh,
show.
I'm so honored to be on your show. I love that you're doing this show. I think it's an important show, and I've enjoyed watching all your episodes. So, best of luck to this moving forward.
So if you've ever felt like you're waiting for someone else to choose you, to open the door to some opportunity, to give you permission, let this conversation be your wake up call. You do not need to wait. You get to create. Whether it's writing your own script, directing your own life, or simply taking the next step towards your vision. The real power is in taking action. And if you're tired of being inspired but still stuck, oh, so frustrating, make sure you grab our free guide, Moving Beyond Motivation and Into Action. It is packed with tools to help you stop spinning your wheels and start building your empire. And in the next episode, I'm going to dive even deeper into exactly how to stay in action even when self doubt creeps in. So don't miss it.